all OBAC members remain on camera throughout the meeting, if at all possible. And in order to preserve bandwidth, we ask that non-members remain off camera unless they are providing public testimony. So Katie is going to call the roll.
Thank you, Nora. Debbie.
What was that? Sorry,
Just calling roll.
Oh, yes, here.
Mike.
Here.
Jonathan. Jonathan present. If you're here, I can't hear you. Okay. Angelica.
Hi, here. Sorry, my microphone.
Renisha.
Here.
Nora.
Here.
Michelle.
Here.
Nathan. Nathan join. Kelly. I see.
Here.
Great. Do we have our ODHS rep? Jillian or CJ? Okay. Our OHA rep, Nikki, are you here?
I am here.
Okay, great.
Great. Move on to agenda review. In a quick note that I mentioned a second ago, forward, we'll do our best to ensure that the public comment starts at roughly 1:20 for each meeting. With that in mind, today's meeting will include review and voting of the May OBAC minutes, public comment, general OBAC updates, demographic updates, a discussion about the ARPA expiration and the federal reconciliation bill's impact on basic health program revenue, a conversation about the OHP bridge plan design changes in light of federal changes, community engagement updates, and then we'll end. So we can start with a vote on the draft OBAC meeting minutes for, now I'm forgetting on that was June?
Should be May.
May, sorry. Okay, so do I hear a motion to approve the draft May meeting minutes?
So moved.
Thank you. And a second?
Second.
Thanks. Okay, Katie, you can take the vote.
Debbie.
Aye.
Mike.
Aye.
Jonathan is not here. Angelica.
Aye. Yes.
Nora.
Yes.
Michelle.
Yes, and your voice is really low, Katie. I don't know if you have a microphone that's not picking you up or something.
Okay, I will try to speak louder. I'm not sure where I increase it, so we'll work from there. Let me know if y'all can't hear me. I can't see everyone either, so yeah, just noting that. Askina's not here. Nathan's not here. Kelly.
Yes.
Right. And okay, fantastic. Back to you, Nora.
All right, as promised, moving on to public comment. We'll now have sorry, I'm like saying things and reading and anyway. The OHP Bridge Advisory Committee welcomes and deeply appreciates public testimony. To be respectful of everyone's time and ensure that we're focused on listening, we will not respond to what you share, nor will we attempt to fix or resolve the question or concern that you bring today. We'll also not interject to correct inaccurate comments that are shared as fact. We will take your comments seriously, understand that it's an important consideration for our work, and listen with careful attention and respect. We want to acknowledge that the time held in our meetings to hear public testimony is meant to provide a voice and perspective from that individual and is not a representation of the OHP Bridge Advisory Committee, its members, or the Oregon Health Authority. Each presenter is given 2 minutes to share, and in the event that that doesn't feel like enough time, we encourage you to provide written testimony, which we commit to reading. To help us keep on time, we'll start a 2-minute timer for each commenter. Kindly ask that commenters conclude their presentation when the timer is complete. Please know that written and verbal public comments will be reviewed and discussed following each meeting by the committee chairs and staff to determine the appropriate next steps. And if needed, public commenters are welcome to share their video while they're presenting public comment, but we do ask that you keep videos off for the remainder of the meeting to help reduce bandwidth capacity issues.
How many folks would like to offer public comment?
All right, last call, anyone? Okay. We'll move on to general OBAC updates. Katie Waldo, our OBAC staff lead, will walk us through some general updates.
Great. And can everyone see the PowerPoint again? Okay, perfect. All right. Hi, everyone. Just to reiterate, my name is Katie Waldo. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Senior Project Manager for OHP Bridge and the staff lead for the OHP Bridge Advisory Committee. So we've just got a couple kind of quick updates for you all, some that we promised we would follow up on from our May meeting, and then some new ones. So to start, we just wanted to call out that this meeting, our July meeting, marks the first quarterly meeting. So just a reminder for folks that might be joining us for the first time, we kicked off the OBAC in October of 2024, so last year, and we did an initial set of 6 meetings that were monthly, just to help lay the groundwork and bring our members up to speed on kind of where, what building OHP Bridge looked like and kind of where it is now. And then with the intent of switching to quarterly meetings after that. So this is the first of those. So going forward, all of our OBAC meetings will be held in January, April, July, and October, and they will be 3 hours. So those previous monthly meetings were 2 hours. We'll be reducing their frequency, but extending the length of the meeting themselves. We won't always have 3 hours of materials for you, but we do ask that everybody reserve that time in case we are filling the full time. We also want to take this moment to remind our members that per our operating procedures, we do need members to attend at least 3 meetings a year in order to reach that 75% threshold that you're required to attend in order to maintain your OBAC member status. Obviously, we understand that extenuating circumstances exist. There are family emergencies or emergencies of various kinds. In that case, just a reminder to please reach out to us ahead of time to let us know that you can't attend, and we'll work with you to see what we can do to make sure you're kept up to date and able to maintain that member status. Okay. We also wanted to kind of, as we shift onto this quarterly cycle of things, we wanted to announce that we're also going to be doing our first round of recruitment for new member seats. So again, just to kind of harken back to the original back in October when we kicked things off, we asked some of our members to, select between a 1-year initial term or a 2-year initial term. And this was to ensure that we don't have sort of all of a sudden an overturn of all of our members at once, and that we're keeping it staggered so that we always have folks that have some historical knowledge of the program on the committee. So just to let everyone know what the process looks like when folks reach the end of their term. we do reach out to individuals who are just completing their first term and ask them if they would like to stay on the committee for a second term. They get priority. If they select to stay with us, then they are asked to complete the application and maintain their seat that way. If folks choose to not continue on to a second term, then we open their position up to public applicants. So with that in mind, we wanted to say that we're really excited to be welcoming Renisha back for a 2-year term. And going forward, everybody will do 2-year terms in order to keep that overlap or to keep that rolling status. So we're really, really excited to have Renisha joining us again, that she's elected to do that. So she'll be with us from 2025 to 2027. We also wanted to issue a huge thank you to Michelle, Eskina, and Nathan, who were with us for that 1 year and have opted not to continue on for a second term. We really appreciate all of the thoughts and time and energy that you've dedicated to the committee. You've brought some really excellent questions and thought partnership. And we're excited to hopefully see you in the OHP Bridge space in the future in some capacity. It does mean that we will be opening recruitment for their seats. So that means that we'll be searching for one more OHP Bridge member representative, one healthcare provider representative, and one health equity representative. And I'll talk a bit more about what applying for that looks like here in a moment. But we did want to announce that recruitment is open today. It's been posted on the website, and then I will also be sending out a blurb through our email listserv. So if folks are interested in applying, there's an OBAC. The OBAC website, as I mentioned, is updated with a link to a role overview. So it provides a little bit more information on what being a member looks like. And then that overview also includes a link to the application. And you can find all of that at the website that's here on the screen. That application will stay open through the end of August. So there is a fairly large window for folks that are interested. And then we will be reviewing all the applicants at the beginning of September and announcing them in the middle of September. And they'll be attending their first meeting on October 16th. And we'll be putting together over the next couple months kind of some onboarding documents for our new members to bring them up to speed. With that in mind, if anybody on this call knows folks who are interested or you think might be a good fit, please share this information out to them. We are always excited to see good, strong applicants apply, and we were really impressed with the initial round of recruitment that we got last year. So we're really excited about seeing who applies this time around. So does anybody have, I do want to pause for a moment and see if anybody has questions about sort of the recruitment process and renewing your position on the OBAC. Also, can folks hear me? Am I talking loud enough? Okay, cool. I'm kind of excited to be told to talk louder because I feel like I normally talk very loudly anyways, and I'm told that I'm very loud, so this is fun. Okay. Right along. Okay, so our next update is kind of an update we promised you in May when we gave you the overview of our submitting our revised blueprint to CMS. So as a reminder, the BHP blueprint is the legal function that we use or the infrastructure for running the OHP Bridge Basic Health Program component of OHP Bridge. And so this every year states can update their blueprint to make sure that it's accurate and reflecting current information. So we did submit one this year, and we are really excited to announce that CMS approved our blueprint on the 17th. So just as a reminder, it included a couple revisions. The first was just technical cleanup, making sure that everybody's name and titles and things were reflected accurately. The second was renewing our plan choice exception, which will run through the end of 2026. And then the last was a temporary solution to the coverage gap issue that we discussed more in depth in May. And so just to kind of dive a little bit deeper into what that's going to look like. So as a reminder, this is a coverage gap that can happen during open enrollment on the marketplace. And due to some unique intersections between enrollment logic for OHP Bridge and healthcare.gov logic, some folks can end up, if they end up being approved for OHP Bridge, can end up falling into a somewhat unique coverage gap at the beginning of the year. So Oregon has worked with CMS to determine how best to kind of help these folks who experience that gap. So individuals that fall into the requirements that are listed here on the screen will have the opportunity to opt into backdated coverage for services that were received during the coverage gap. And so that will be backdated coverage through January 1 of this year. Okay, so our next update is regarding something called the annual income lower limit. And this is just to let folks know that we will be updating our eligibility system to ensure federal compliance. So as folks should know, based on those earlier presentations on OHP Bridge, per the federal regulations for basic health programs, we can only use the BHP trust fund to cover individuals who have an annual income between 133 and 200% of the federal poverty level. And we will have a visual to represent this here in a moment, because I know sometimes seeing a lot of these numbers on the screen for me gets a little hard to follow. So we discovered earlier this year that the way the one system was running its income test, and the one system is what determines the eligibility for our state medical programs, was not catching individuals properly based on monthly versus annual income. So Medicaid analyzes income based on your monthly income, and BHP, due to federal regulations, analyzes based on annual income. And there were some folks who had a monthly income that was too high for Medicaid, but an annual income that is technically too low for OHP Bridge. And those folks were mistakenly enrolled into OHP Bridge. So we have taken steps to update our system to ensure that these folks are determined correctly. So in June, we implemented a system fix that was meant to catch new enrollees. And then earlier this week on July 15th, we implemented a fix to catch folks that are currently on Bridge incorrectly. And so those folks will be receiving closure notices and referred to the marketplace or to the correct coverage option for them. So just to provide a little bit of an image, more of an image based on this. So folks over 200% of the FPL who have an annual income over 200%, this part remains unchanged. These are folks that will be going to the marketplace. Individuals who have an annual income between 133 and 200% of the federal poverty level will be on Bridge. Folks who have an annual income between 100 and 133% will go to the marketplace, and then under 100% annually will go to OHP, and that's again unchanged. So I think that's our last update. Any question from folks on any of those updates? Nora.
This is maybe, I don't, if we can't get into this level of detail, it's fine. But I was just thinking about if the person loses their coverage, do they then have, because at the time that they were assessed, say last December, their income didn't fit the category, but now do they have a new open enrollment opportunity? And if their income is in the right level, can they then go back on the marketplace or on the BHP rather?
Yeah,
I don't know how often that is going to happen, but it seems like a logical possibility.
Yeah, Tim, are you able to provide more info here?
Sorry, yes, making sure I was off the double mute. So I want to, I guess, make sure I'm following. So if somebody was enrolled with enrolled in OHP Bridge with annual income in this 100 to 133% of poverty, the system fixes are, as part of the cleanup, are looking at their income again. So if they've reported a change in income, if they've adjusted income or whatever, and it is now in the 133 to 200% range, then they would not get a closure notice. The system would be like, oh, even though you initially were enrolled with income below the 133 threshold, if it's now in the correct threshold, they would get they would stay uncovered. If they're below, then they will get the closure notice and be referred to the marketplace. They will be able to enroll in the marketplace because of the Medicaid BHP closure. So they won't have to wait for marketplace open enrollment. And then down the line, if their income goes back into the correct threshold, the 133 to 200 range, then they would be able to come back to OHP Bridge. I don't know if that exactly answers your question. And if not, maybe you could pose it again and I can make sure I'm getting it.
Yeah, I was just thinking like if the income that was being assessed was 2024 income. And then now we were like, oh, oops, we made this error and you shouldn't be on, but their 2025 income is in the right range. So you're just saying that that would be done behind the scenes. They're not even seeing that.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Helpful. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. To that point, like folks who are getting that closure notice are also, told to update their income if they have a new income amount. So that could also affect their future eligibility.
Any additional questions?
So Katie, I don't have a question, is more of a comment. And I know this is the way the process works, and some of this is probably a big assumption on my part, but the way I've kind of looked at it is OHP, again, my thoughts. OHP is better than OHP Bridge, which is better than Marketplace. But we have this level where they're at 100 to 133 where we're putting them on Marketplace. And I understand that's how the system works, but those are the individuals I would prefer to be on something that's a little bit more affordable than having to go to the marketplace. So I know this is the way it works in practice because the 133 and above is what we're allowed to use the general funds for OHP Bridge. But conceptually, I don't know. I don't want to say how I feel about that, but to me, it seems like there's an odd piece there where I would expect those individuals to be on OHP Bridge more than the people that are at the higher federal poverty level, if that makes sense.
Totally get that and agree that there's sort of a weirdness to this. I would, I guess, also call attention to the bullet is that this graphic is only for folks whose monthly income is above 138% of poverty, right? Like somebody who's reporting monthly income of 132% of poverty, their annual income doesn't matter. They will be in Medicaid. They will not be in the marketplace with income between 100 and 133% of poverty. So which is not to say it's not still a weird scenario and a bit counterintuitive. It is at least worth noting that in most cases, individuals' monthly and annual income are in alignment and both below 133 or both above 133, and they will end up either in OHP or in OHP Bridge. It's just in these sort of less common scenarios where somebody's annual and monthly income is not in alignment. But agreed that it feels odd to have this situation where somebody's income is in between the thresholds for Medicaid and the BHP. And it is just a unfortunate quirk in the way the two federal programs define eligibility using different income definitions.
Thanks, Deb.
Any other questions on this? Okay. Nora, I will hand it back to you.
You've gone back to being super quiet, Katie.
Sorry.
No worries. Okay, moving on to demographic updates. We have Josie Musin. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say your last name, so you can correct me. Who's a senior research analyst for our coverage team and is going to provide a comparison of OHP Bridge, Medicaid expansion, and marketplace population demographics. This presentation is building on the May demographics discussion and is providing more context on how the OHP Bridge population aligns with and is different from other coverage programs. For OBAC members, Josie can take questions throughout the presentation. Please remember to raise your hand, either like this or electronically so that we can see when there is a question. Take it away.
Thank you. Let me know if there's any audio issues. Hello, I'm Josie Musin, sorry, you can go to the next slide. As mentioned, I'm going to go over some demographic data related to OHP Bridge, but before I get started, I did want to go over a few technical notes to just define things that are going to be shown on the subsequent slides. So when we refer to OHP Bridge data, this includes both BHP and basic Medicaid members. When we refer to OHP Medicaid, that includes all Medicaid and CHIP members, except those who are eligible only for the Medicare Savings Program, sometimes referred to as partial duals. And importantly, it does not include the Healthier Oregon Program members, although in the future, we may look at including them or including them as a separate category. OHP Medicaid ACA expansion eligibility groups. This is the members who are age 19 to 64. I have a household income up to 138% of the federal poverty level and are not eligible for other eligibility groups. We pulled this group out because we expect that they are most likely to be transitioning to and from Bridge. So we look at Medicaid overall and then Medicaid just at these eligibility groups. We have some marketplace data that we've pulled from the CMS public use files that represent plan selections at the end of open enrollment for the 2025 coverage year. Because these are public use files, our ability to analyze things and cross demographic categories is pretty limited. So for example, we don't have income by age or income by a number of other categories, which makes it somewhat difficult to kind of triangulate who the population of most interest is, but we're working with what we have. And then specifically the race and ethnicity data has a high missingness rate and is not comparable to the OHP data. So we didn't do a whole lot of analysis on the marketplace side there. And then for OHP Bridge and Medicaid, the race and ethnicity data, just noting that it comes from the RealD and SOGI repository rather than MMIS, since the repository is a more complete and validated source of that data. So all that to say, next slide, we can actually get into the data. Okay, so the first thing we looked at was age, and you can see comparing OHP Bridge to the Medicaid ACA expansion eligibility groups, they look very similar. The biggest difference is in the age 19 to 20 category, but otherwise the two groups are quite similar, a percentage point or two difference here and there. Marketplace, on the other hand, looks very different. The plan selections, more than a third of them were for ages 55 to 64. So it's a much older population. But again, because we don't have income, it's possible that the older folks are also higher income and therefore would be, less likely to transition to Bridge. We don't really know. However, I would expect that as we start seeing more marketplace folks transition to Bridge, the Bridge population would get at least somewhat older just due to the difference between marketplace and Bridge. Okay, so the second thing we looked at was geography, and similar to the presentation a couple of months ago, we used geographic rating areas, which I understand is not the typical view of the data when looking at it from a Medicaid lens, but it can be helpful from Bridge because of the fact that the basic health program funding formula relies on, to some degree, premiums from the individual market, which uses these rating areas. So just as a reminder, the geographic rating areas are used in the individual and small group market to define how, or it's one way that premiums can vary. So for a given plan in those markets, a premium stays the same within a rating area and can differ across rating areas. And the basic health program, one of the pieces that goes into the funding calculation is the premium of the second lowest cost silver plan offered on the marketplace in the individual market. So that's why it's somewhat relevant here and offers a nice way to summarize the data. So looking at the actual data, you can see that, again, Bridge looks very similar to Medicaid overall and Medicaid just looking at the ACA expansion eligibility groups. There's a percentage point difference here and there, but they just look very similar. The marketplace, a little bit different, not as much as we saw on the age side of things, but you can see that in the Portland metro area, there are more marketplace enrollees than Bridge, and in the rating area 4, Bend and Klamath area, likewise, there's a little bit more in the marketplace than in OHP Bridge, and then likewise, the other 5 rating areas have slightly fewer enrollees on the marketplace and more on Bridge. So we'll monitor over time if we do start to see Bridge look a little bit more like the marketplace as additional folks transition. So next slide. And then the third thing we looked at was race and ethnicity data. So there's a lot going on here and just a few additional notes to add some context as to what this data is showing. We are looking at an enrollee's primary race and ethnicity category. So members can, it's a multi-select form. So they can select one or more race and ethnicity categories. And if they do select more than one, they're asked to identify which one is their primary race and ethnicity. And that's what we're looking at here. There is information on these kind of multi-selections, sometimes referred to as quote unquote alone or in combination with, at the public dashboard linked at the bottom of the slide. And that dashboard does have a filter that allows you to look just at Bridge. And then likewise, this just due to space constraints is showing the aggregated race ethnicity categories. There are underneath each of these more granular categories or disaggregated categories. And that is also available on the public dashboard. We did look at that offline, and we have a couple of notes on that on the next slide, but here we're showing the aggregated categories. And then finally, you'll notice on the left bar, the OHP Bridge has 2 gray sections for declined or missing. There's also an unknown category that is too small to even show on this slide. But these are folks who we don't have race and ethnicity data for. That's about 12% for Bridge and 13 to 14% for Medicaid. So on the right-hand side, we are looking at just the population for whom we have a known race and ethnicity. It's important to note that those who we don't have a race and ethnicity, so the gray bars, the declined, missing, unknown, that may not look like those who we do have a race ethnicity for, so there may be some bias. So the specific percents on the right may not be entirely accurate. However, we're making the assumption that the bias is consistent. Oh, good. Bias is consistent across the groups. So making a comparison is reasonable. If the percents are incorrect, they're incorrect in the same way across the 3 groups. So all that to say, the actual data shows that OHP Bridge looks very similar to OHP Medicaid overall. The biggest difference is in the Black and African American category. The Bridge members were 2 percentage points less likely to identify as Black or African American, and then those percentage points are distributed between Asian and Hispanic Latino categories. The ACA expansion eligibility groups look a little bit different compared to Bridge. They are more likely to identify as white and less likely to identify as Hispanic Latino compared to Bridge. This is largely an artifact of us not including Healthier Oregon in this analysis. So OHP Bridge allows additional eligibility. Allows additional immigration statuses to have eligibility versus Medicaid. So someone who is in Healthier Oregon and has an income less than 138% may be eligible for Bridge if they have an income over 138% FPL. So because we're not including that group, it kind of shows up in the demographics here. If we do include Healthier Oregon, along with the ACA expansion eligibility groups, then that population looks very similar to Bridge. So we think that's what's driving the trend at the moment. Okay, next slide. Think there are any questions. Okay. The first bullet was just going over the bars on the last slide. And then the second was what I mentioned about the disaggregated race and ethnicity categories, which there's too many to show on a slide like this, but we did take a look at them to see if there was anything that the aggregated categories were masking. We did find some small differences. So within the white, Hispanic, Latino, and Asian categories, OHP Bridge members were less likely than OHP Medicaid members to select a quote unquote other subcategory and more likely to identify a specific racial or ethnic identity. So an example of this is taking the Hispanic Latino aggregate category. Underneath that are 4 subcategories: Mexican, Central American, South American, and other Hispanic or Latino. And we're seeing for Bridge that they are less likely to select that last one, that other Hispanic or Latino, and more likely to select one of the other 3 categories. The same thing with the white and Asian aggregate categories. Kind of the reverse in the Black and African American category, OHP Bridge members were less likely than OHP Medicaid members to identify as African American or other Black, and more likely to identify as other African. I will note that these differences are pretty small. And our population at this point is pretty small, especially when you start disaggregating to this level. So we'll have to monitor over time whether these trends continue to hold. And then finally, we didn't show marketplace race and ethnicity data because the categories that the marketplace reports for race and ethnicity are not one-to-one comparisons with what we have in Oregon, as well as there's a missingness rate over 20%. So we suspect that there's a lot of bias in the data. However, the data that we do have does suggest that the marketplace population is more likely than OHP Bridge members to identify as white and less likely to identify as Hispanic, Latino, or American Indian, Alaska Native. So again, well, because we don't know if we don't know how this crosses with the population from the marketplace that's most likely to transition to Bridge. So we'll look over time to see if Bridge starts looking more like the marketplace, or what we can see of the marketplace from the available data. So next slide. Okay. And then this is just summarizing. So the story of the 3 things that we looked at, so the age, geography, and race and ethnicity, is that Bridge looks very similar to the Medicaid population right now, but substantially different from Marketplace. And this isn't surprising. The Bridge members, at least back, in July 2024, were almost all from people who moved from Medicaid, specifically the temporary Medicaid expansion that was in place during unwinding. But over time, we would expect to see a little bit more divergence because there will be people who have transitioned from the marketplace or other coverage types, or people who were previously uninsured. And so they, may not resemble the current Bridge demographics. So we'll continue to look at it and come back with more data. And we'll also continue to look at other enrollment trends, things like patterns of coverage transitions, how families are split between different types of coverage programs. So we'll come back with more information, but if there's any questions that are top of mind or things folks would like to see, we're of course always interested in hearing that. So yeah, I'm gonna take any questions if there are any.
Any questions?
Okay, well, hearing nothing, we can say thank you, Josie. And we are continuing our tradition of being early. So we're going to stop now for a 10-minute break, which brings us back at 1:57.
Nora, how's my sound now? Is it louder?
Yeah. Sounds
Okay,
good.
great. You got
We
your
did
phones on.
it.
We did it. Thank you for that suggestion, Lou.
My pleasure.
Okay, is everybody back? And can everyone still see the screen?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, over to you, Nora.
Okay. So welcome back. We're going to jump back into content. And I'm going to hand it to Tim Sweeney, Senior Policy Analyst and Coverage Team Policy Lead. Tim is going to bring us back to the ARPA conversation that we started in May. As a quick reminder, ARPA stands for American Rescue Plan Act, which was established the Enhanced Marketplace Tax Credits that helped increase revenue for the basic health programs, including the Oregon Health Plan Bridge program. Tim's going to be walking us through the updated information on the potential expiration of these tax credits and how they interact with other funding factors to fill out the OHP Bridge revenue landscape for 2026. Nice, simple thinking right there. For our OBAC members, Tim will also take questions throughout the presentation. Again, use your raise hand function. Floor is yours, Tim.
Great. Thank you very much. Again, I'm Tim Sweeney. I'm in the Office of Health Policy at OHA. And I think we can go to the next slide. And wanted to start with a reminder, sort of of the structure of the funding formula from the federal government to the state to pay for OHP Bridge. And we have a new graphic that hopefully can help pull all this together. But it's sort of a reminder that there are several factors that determine the federal funding amount that we get for OHP Bridge. There are the value of the premium tax credits, the orange ball in there, that people would be eligible for on the marketplace. And the tax credits depend on the age and income and and region of the state and household size of an individual person or family. And then there are some formula adjustment factors. There's one called that take into account a variety of factors that influence the marketplace rates, really to sort of account for what those premium tax credits would be in absence of these of some other policy decisions. For instance, Oregon has a reinsurance program that reduces premiums for health insurance plans on the marketplace. That, in theory, if you didn't have a factor to adjust for that, would reduce the funding that the state gets for the BHP. So there's a factor that accounts for that reinsurance program to give states basically credit or to not penalize states really in their BHP for having a reinsurance program. There's an adjustment factor based on population health. There's something called the premium adjustment factor, which accounts for silver loading that happens in the marketplace to cover the cost of something called cost sharing reductions that are available to folks with income between 133 and 200% of poverty on the marketplace. And there's lastly something called income reconciliation factor, which really looks at the difference between the advanced premium tax credits that people get on the marketplace and the end of year premium tax credits that folks get as they file taxes. Sometimes the advanced amounts are different than at the end of the year. One reason we really wanted to sort of like remind of this funding formula is also to note some specific changes in the premium adjustment factor. Again, this is a factor that accounts for silver loading or accounts for the fact that states without a basic health program wouldn't do silver loading in the same way that they would if these individuals were served in the marketplace. In 2024, when the state launched OHP Bridge, the 1.188 adjustment factor was not included in Oregon's funding formula. And this is due to the way that federal rule is written and the fact that essentially Oregon still had a robust silver load in the marketplace rates. So the conclusion in federal rule basically is that adjustment factor wouldn't apply because of that in the first year of the state implementing the program. In 2025, Oregon received the full premium adjustment factor, and then CMS made some rule changes that would enable CMS to modify the premium adjustment factor for states in their first year of implementation. And the way that the rule was written created some sort of ambiguity as to how it would apply to Oregon in 2026. In previous conversations, I think we had expressed to the committee that it's possible that we would have a modified premium adjustment factor in 2026 because of that new CMS rule. However, we actually learned from CMS within the last few weeks that Oregon will, again, as in 2025, in 2026, we will receive the full premium adjustment factor, that full 1.188 multiplier in the formula. The result of that really is that BHP funding in 2026 is going to be greater than we had previously been expecting. We had sort of maybe just out of an abundance of caution, kind of anticipated that the CMS may use that modified adjustment factor in the new rule. But so the news that they're not, that we're getting the full 1.188 factor is good news for the state funding level in 2026. You know, that was a lot of talking on a slide with a lot of words, even with a wonderful graphic. Are there any questions on the funding formula on this factor before I move forward and sort of like put this into more context and talk about the federal pieces broadly? Okay, well, we can always come back to this as well if other questions pop up. So outside of that adjustment factor issue, there are other federal changes that could affect our BHP revenue in 2026. First off, I would note that the income reconciliation factor especially is adjusted every year, but broadly speaking, CMS can revisit the funding formula, and the BHP payment notice comes out every year in August. So we'll get more information next month, but especially around the income reconciliation factor, which certainly has an impact on the overall funding level. For sort of in 2024, or from 2024 to 2025, the income reconciliation factor fell, which means it reduced the funding level for the BHP. We don't know. We're not assuming that it's going to fall again from 2025 to 2026, but just to note that it can change over time. And then enhanced marketplace tax credits that were established by ARPA were not renewed in the reconciliation bill. They are set to expire at the end of December 2025. Obviously, that means there's still several months. They still could get renewed. When they were renewed in 2022 or 2023, I believe, that was pretty late in the year when it happened. So it's certainly possible that it could still happen, but at this point, we're not anticipating that those enhanced tax credits would be there, and thus we've done some analysis on the impact of BHP revenue that we'll get to in a minute. It's worth noting that the reconciliation package includes some marketplace and Medicaid provisions that could, some that likely will, and some that likely could affect BHP eligibility, revenue, and or operations. I think there's still some uncertainty, but we'll talk about that as well. And then last month, I believe, CMS finalized what they call the marketplace integrity rule that also could have some impact on future BHP revenue because it will likely have some impact on marketplace premiums. That impact is less clear because there's a variety of different components that could affect marketplace premiums in that, but it is something we're tracking as potentially affecting our revenue in the future years. Okay, so to dive into the impact of ARPA tax credits expiring, it's worth noting, and we'll go into this in a little bit more detail with some tables too, but that the revenue impact varies based on members' age and income, and that broadly speaking, the federal funding loss is greatest for younger enrollees and for higher income enrollees. Said another way, the federal funding loss is less for older enrollees and lower income enrollees. And so the demographics of our population do end up mattering in terms of what the end financial impact is. So based on the age and income of members enrolled from July to September 2024, and I think some additional analysis looked at some of the age distribution in January of 2025. So based on sort of like the current, previous enrollment, the ARPA expiration would reduce our per member, or reduce our program revenue by about 11 to 12%. Considering demographic changes as more people move from the marketplace into OHP Bridge for plan year 2026, that revenue loss would fall to like 8 or 9%. And largely that's because the cohort that is expected to move from the marketplace to OHP Bridge is a little bit older. And so the revenue loss, that impact of losing ARPA is a little bit less. So we're sort of talking about this like 8 to 12% range. So yeah, no, the next slide is great. So this table shows sort of what the revenue impact is by age and by income of members, and thus sort of aggregates it at the bottom across all ages, and on the side across all incomes, and then the very bottom right corner is that 11.6% is sort of across the population. Again, looking at the 2025 enrollment mix, not considering folks continuing to move from the marketplace. And so here you can see that, for instance, across all incomes, the revenue loss for 19 to 34-year-olds is almost 18%, whereas the revenue loss for 55 to 64-year-olds is only 4%. And sort of going the other way, you can see that for the higher income cohort, the revenue loss is about 12%, and for the lowest income group, it's 7.5%. And so all of that together works out to about an 11.6% per member revenue change due to the loss of ARPA. And so I do want to clarify, this is not revenue loss from 2025 to 2026. This is revenue loss in 2026 strictly due to the loss of ARPA. So then this next slide is really, back one. It's really the same thing, except this looks at the actuarial team that did this work modeled a projected 2026 enrollment mix that, again, has more people coming from the marketplace, which we do expect more people to continue to move from the marketplace, but really reflects the changing age and income distribution of the population that will happen when people move from the marketplace. So there's a similar relationship here, in the sense of for the lowest income and the older members, that revenue loss is smaller, and for the highest income and or younger members, that revenue loss is higher. I wanted to sort of show both of these so you could sort of understand why we're saying there's about an 8 to 12% revenue loss that is depending on if we're right about that population moving from the marketplace, right, then it's in this lower 8.7% range. And if that population, that enrollment mix is more like what it is in early 2025, we're looking at a higher revenue loss. Any questions on these things before moving forward? Now, to put this in context, this 8 to 12% revenue loss beginning in 2026. Again, it's worth reminding the actual impact could vary. I would say it will vary, right? We're never exactly right in these models, depending on factors like member age and income. And that ongoing movement from the marketplace will certainly affect the overall revenue estimates. Now, to put that 8 to 12% in context, 2025 federal revenue on a per member basis is estimated to exceed program costs by about 20%. Again, plus or minus a little bit, depending on actual enrollment mix at the end of the year. And this really is that 20% really is driven by a couple factors. One is the ARPA tax credits, the enhanced tax credits, have a big impact on revenue, right? And in 2025, we get the full premium adjustment factor on top of marketplace premiums that still had some level of silver load in there. So it is worth noting that from 2025 to 2026, in addition to this ARPA revenue loss, silver load drops a little bit, so there will be revenue loss due to that. But the 2025 situation really is that estimated revenue is well above estimated costs, which means that this revenue hit for 2026 may very well be manageable within current program structure. And by current program structure, I mean, pretty much the Medicaid service package outside of HRSN and long-term services and supports, no premiums or co-payments for members, and at the capitation rate structure that is similar to Medicaid. Further cost and revenue analysis is underway as part of the 2026 capitation rate development. So that's a big reason why we can't say more definitively 2026 revenue will exceed cost by X%, because that cap rate development process is still underway. And certainly there are program changes there could be future program changes that result from the reconciliation bill that may affect program revenue and or per member costs. So that could also impact this financial situation in future years. So speaking of that reconciliation bill, I think it's first important to note that we are still analyzing the bill to better understand and really quantify the impact various provisions have across OHA's programs, right? On Medicaid, on the marketplace, and on OHP Bridge. And I would note that the impact to OHP Bridge has been challenging to quantify because it could depend on CMS regulatory strategy and also how the state implements new requirements for Medicaid. It's worth noting that for the most part, the reconciliation bill does not explicitly target BHP statute. And I would say it is unclear whether CMS has authority to extend some provisions via the regulatory process. I think there's certainly some thought that they don't, but also I would hesitate to make any sort of sweeping conclusion that they do or don't have authority to extend requirements via the regulatory process in any fashion. So there's certainly ongoing analysis on that front and some wait and see to see what CMS does. But also wanted to note that Oregon's use of the Medicaid infrastructure may also lead to impacts to OHP Bridge, right? We use the Medicaid CCOs, we use the Medicaid eligibility process, we in general trying to align with Medicaid as much as possible, and that may cause complications or challenges down the road. So a little bit more detail about some of the provisions that we're paying attention to, and I would stress this is very unclear whether these requirements could be applied to basic health programs by CMS through their regulatory process. So this is in no way trying to say this will happen to the BHP, but just these are some of the notable Medicaid provisions that we're paying attention to as it relates to OHP Bridge. So the first one is effective at the end of 2026. The work reporting requirements and more frequent redeterminations go into effect for the Medicaid expansion population, certainly with some exceptions. If either of these requirements were extended to basic health programs, the fact that they would reduce enrollment, and especially the more frequent redeterminations, I think it would be safe to say that they would likely drive up per member costs, just because of how these sorts of policies generally play out on the Medicaid side. When you reduce enrollment, you're more likely to lose less expensive people, more likely to keep the more expensive people, even if it's not a dramatic change. Even just on the margins, they could drive up per member cost, which certainly would have an impact on the BHP. Medicaid cost sharing requirements for folks with income above 100% of the poverty level go into effect in 2028. Again, we don't want to suggest that we think CMS will or can extend these, but if they did, certainly it would have an impact on our program. And even without that, there will be considerations that stem from needing to make changes in Medicaid to do things, and considerations of how the use of the Medicaid infrastructure to deliver OHP Bridge has an effect on that. And I don't want to imply that it means we have to match Medicaid policy changes, but just it's a note that this is an issue out there that will need to be considered. And then I think that the next piece to just call out is payment restrictions for certain gender affirming care services and for Planned Parenthood clinics. Again, these are not explicitly applied to BHP in the bill, and it is as such unclear whether CMS will try or be successful if they do try to extend any of these restrictions to state BHPs. Yeah, Nora, please.
Just to put a fine point on what it means that the reliance of Medicaid infrastructure is, for most enrollees, it is, it doesn't really look different in terms of, your coverage or the administration of that coverage. You have a CCO, you have a plan, you're treated the same, whether you have Medicaid or BHP. And so I can imagine that what you're talking about is when any one of these federal requirements goes into effect, that the state may decide it's inequitable to say people with lower income will be subject to cost sharing, but people with slightly higher income would not be within the same program.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that's certainly, I think there's that piece, and also the reality that the complexity involved in some of the system changes to implement these policies, just uncertainty as to how that complexity then plays out in terms of the ability to apply them to some programs and not others, or to some members and not others, and certainly just the level of uncertainty as we go into that process, I think is worth noting. But I super appreciate your comments. It's going to be a challenge. So next, I'll talk a little bit about a couple of marketplace changes that we're getting some greater, I don't want to say clarity, but better understanding of some of the challenges that are created here. And at a high level, the marketplace changes that we're trying to highlight here are some changes that eliminate tax credit eligibility, eliminate financial assistance eligibility for certain groups of non-citizens, that then also will affect the state's ability to get BHP revenue on behalf of those individuals. And so one of the provisions, or one change, it's a collection of provisions, I believe, removes tax credit eligibility for certain groups of non-citizens defined previously through what's called an eligible alien clause. And sorry to use that term, but that's what's in the federal law. And it really narrows the scope of non-citizens eligible for marketplace tax credits to be LPRs and some other small groups. And I think that the main groups that are taken out are some refugees and asylees and some folks with some temporary protected statuses. I think there's several different types of status that currently can get marketplace tax credits, and effective January 2027 will no longer be eligible for marketplace tax credits. And this is across income ranges. And so from a BHP standpoint, the folks in the 133 to 200% is sort of where the impact is on the BHP. And the second provision that goes into effect sooner, it goes into effect in January 2026, would remove tax credit eligibility for otherwise eligible non-citizens with income below 100% of poverty who are ineligible for Medicaid due to their immigration and citizenship status. That is I would say nationally, it's a bigger issue. In Oregon, this is a group that is eligible for Healthier Oregon. And so right now they are not covered by OHP Bridge. They are able to get marketplace tax credits, but they're also able to get Healthier Oregon. So this federal policy change will be less impactful from a coverage eligibility for individuals, but it will be in terms of this is then no longer a group that we could try to get federal funding through the BHP for. Like as a state, Healthier Oregon would be the only way we could cover them because they would no longer be eligible for these federal funds. What's weird about this, or what's challenging about all this stuff from a BHP standpoint, is that the reconciliation bill eliminates tax credit eligibility for these folks, but it does not change the BHP statute to change BHP eligibility for the folks subject to these new restrictions. And so what it could mean, depending on sort of the CMS approach, is that these folks are federally eligible for the program. They are eligible for OHP Bridge, but the state would not be able to get federal dollars to pay for their costs. And so there's, again, because of the existence of Healthier Oregon and because this 2026 cohort is covered by Healthier Oregon, it's not really a BHP issue until 2027. But in 2027, unless CMS has a regulatory approach that gives flexibility or enables us to still get paid for these folks, there's a possibility that we're in a sort of a scenario where they are eligible for the program based on federal rule, but the state would not get funding on behalf of them. We don't have a sense as to how large this population is, and so we don't really have any sort of financial impact estimates at the moment, and obviously that would certainly inform the policy approach that we bring both to PL, to state leadership, et cetera. I'm going to pause there for a second to see if there are any questions on this or really any of these federal pieces that we just went through. Okay, well, shifting gears a little bit or moving forward a little bit, we wanted to talk about, I think we've been consistently saying we would bring back some sort of plan design conversations as we learned more about the revenue side of the program. And I think the way that we've set these up in the past is a little bit of kind of potentially hard conversations about covered services or other changes in order to live within available revenue. And we wanted to sort of broaden that to also consider these federal changes and the federal landscape in this conversation. So I think we go to the next slide. To reiterate what I think I would at least hope comes across as relatively positive news around the revenue side of everything, is that the initial analysis and really the inclusion of the full premium adjustment factor in 2026 suggests that OHP Bridge can maintain the current program structure despite the loss of enhanced tax credits in 2026. Again, this is in large part, I would say, due to the 2025 funding levels and really that clarification that we will receive the full PAF in 2026. I didn't say this previously, but based on some of our initial estimates, that decision to give us the full PAF versus an adjusted PAF is something like a 6 or 7 percentage point loss avoided, if you will. It's not a bump in our funding by 6 or 7%, but having the full PAF prevents something like a 6 or 7% revenue hit. So it's a significant protection, if you will, from what the revenue loss could have been. That said, as we just discussed, the Medicaid and marketplace provisions of the reconciliation bill may, and hopefully this really is emphasis on may, still necessitate changes in coming years. Certainly, the expiration of the enhanced ARPA subsidies would complicate efforts to increase provider reimbursement rates. We know that has often been one of the goals that we've passed along. That was a goal of the task force in developing the program in the first place, was that in future years they were hoping to see provider rate increases. Certainly the federal revenue loss will complicate those efforts. And then certainly there are operational challenges that we just discussed, and certainly uncertainty regarding the possible application of Medicaid changes to state BHPs. And again, that I think we may not have any clarity on what CMS is trying to do for some time. So hopefully it ends up being an unnecessary worry, but we do want to make sure that it's something called out. So the next steps, I think, from where we're coming from, and hopefully this will inform some of y'all's thoughts, is as much as we said initial analysis suggests plan design changes will not be needed, the 2026 cap rate development process, which is currently underway, will be completed before the October OBAC meeting, and thus that will enable us to have a bit more comprehensive analysis of projected 2026 costs relative to revenue. And I think that will help offer some initial thoughts to inform our thinking around 2027, and whether the funding, whether the cost versus revenue in 2026 is robust enough, or revenue versus cost is robust enough to feel like we're probably in good shape for 2027, or whether that margin is more narrow and starts to sort of necessitate some more in-depth planning for 2027. I think we'll have a better sense of that at the October meeting. Also, it's worth noting that the 2026 BHP payment notice from CMS will likely be out by then. Again, normally it's August, September, so we should have that information in advance of the next meeting as well. And that's where we would see whether there are other changes to the federal funding formula or to the adjustment factors, or any other CMS rule or guidance that we think would affect revenue. And then really, I think this has been said, so sorry for saying this again, but it's worth a reminder that a key plan design goal of OHP Bridge has been to align with Medicaid to the extent feasible. and given sort of administrative and financial realities. In so far, that has largely been the administrative and financial realities have prevented further alignment in ways that we would like to see, right? You know, we don't have the ability to have 2-year continuous eligibility in OHP Bridge like we do in Medicaid, right? On the flip side, some of the policy changes in the reconciliation bill kind of, if they're not applied to BHPs by CMS, creates disincentive for us to maintain that alignment with Medicaid, right? The easy example is the redeterminations of the work reporting requirements. That's not alignment that we would maybe want to have with Medicaid if we don't have to make those changes for OHP Bridge. And I think, you know, if Medicaid has to go to 6-month redeterminations, OHP Bridge is at 12-month coverage period. That you know, we wouldn't want to add overly burdensome requirements to Bridge members if we don't have to. And that said, there's still challenges with not aligning from a system standpoint. Certainly, there's questions if CPOs would face obstacles and or providers would face obstacles if copay and other policies are implemented differently between Bridge and Medicaid. I think that that's an area where we'll want to make sure we fully understand sort of the implications to know whether we can align those programs if that's what's better for Bridge members, but also sort of like you alluded to, Nora, the equity concerns that arise if we're charging lower income folks a copay and not higher income folks, and sort of all the complicated conversations that come with how the state moves forward with that implementation. And then certainly there's ongoing questions of like what might be next from CMS. There's sort of a constant barrage of guidance and program changes, and so far BHP has not really been the target of them, but you know that could change. I would say one thing that maybe came that I helped realize, or that I was helped to realize today, that might be a very positive thing for basic health programs, is that New York has relied on a BHP in the past, and while they don't have one now, they've moved to 1332. A lot of the structure is still the same, and you know, New York has a lot of congressional members from both parties, and so there's potentially that is something that could help protect BHP programs in the long run. In that it's a big state that can hopefully help protect the program. So that said, we do want to talk a little bit about like reminding about the cost levers conversations that we've had before, and sort of point them out a little more directly as it relates to the reconciliation bill. So just as a reminder, the levers that we've really brought to these conversations in the past that have an impact, a potential impact on program financial status are premiums and copays, member costs, the package of services that folks are eligible for, rates paid to providers, and thus the capitation rate development process, and then new payment mechanisms, and thinking here about things like the mirroring the CPS payments to federally qualified health centers, or other conversations of building on directed payments that we have for Medicaid that may or may not exist in OHP Bridge. And so the next slide is a little bit more detail on all these pieces, and I guess still a bit of a reminder of the flexibility that the state has and that the program has in these. You know, OHA does not explicitly control CCO payment rates to providers, but obviously those are affected by the capitation rate development process and the funding that CCOs get from the state to operate the program. And as we've said before, the committee could recommend state action as it relates to the rate assumptions and the cap rate development process if it's at a high level, policy level to achieve either a lower or a higher reimbursement rate assumptions. The committee could recommend that OHA establish new payment mechanisms, such as quality incentive payments or RAP payments, or other payments that exist in Medicaid. That is an area of flexibility that we have in our operation of the program. As far as covered services, there is some flexibility in recommending the additional removal of non-essential health benefits services. Say dental coverage is a notable one that's not part of the essential health benefits for adults, but is part of the OHP Bridge service package. But it's also worth remembering that there's limited flexibility around covered services because of federal rules requiring the coverage of the essential health benefits. And then certainly for member costs is another area where there is some flexibility within federal rules. And there are federal rules that limit the level of costs that can be charged to people enrolled in a basic health program. And then lastly, just to sort of put the considerations of the reconciliation bill in these buckets. And again, with all of these, it's the reminder is that our 2026 revenue projections do not indicate a need to reduce the cost of the program by either reducing rates, reducing covered services, or adding member costs. But it's worth noting, especially that the expiration of ARPA funding would reduce the funding available to make program additions, right? It would reduce the funding available to increase provider rates. It would reduce funding available to add additional services like health-related social needs or long-term services and supports. And while the reconciliation bill requires states to levy copays on some Medicaid members, those requirements do not appear to apply to OHP Bridge. And it's also worth noting that federal requirement isn't until 2028, which is still at least a few years down the road, which also offers more time for CMS to craft that guidance and consider any ability to extend it to BHP. So we may not know what their plan is on that front for some time. That is the end of my slide. Sorry, I feel like I talked a long time, but hopefully that was helpful information, and certainly happy to answer any questions or just to open the floor for y'all to discuss any implications of all of this.
It does feel really challenging to speculate about which pieces are likely to get impacted. And without meaning to be overly critical, the interactions that I've had with OHA have been somewhat optimistic about, I should say more optimistic than I feel, I guess, about the state's ability to get a variety of things pushed back. And so my sense is like there's probably more action at OHA on seeing if we can push back Medicaid implementation timelines than there is in like saying, okay, well, what does this mean for Medicaid? And therefore, are we going to align the bridge elements?
Yeah, I think that's totally fair, and I would, as much as we are trying to align this stuff with Medicaid, also I'm not in the Medicaid division, and so often don't have a lot of insight into to where they're at in terms of some of the planning and strategizing, especially as it relates to some of these pieces that go into effect in 2026. And I think that, I guess I would say, it is something that we will try to engage with them on and stay up to date on. And I kind of feel the same way in that it feels optimistic to think none of this stuff will apply to the OHP bridge. And also it feels potentially real in that the way it was crafted was so narrowly tailored to specific Medicaid populations, and that might mean that they really don't have the flexibility at CMS to go beyond because it was especially the work reporting and the redeterminations were sort of statutorily focused on the Medicaid expansion population and not the part of the Affordable Care Act that has the basic health program. So yeah, I share your sort of uncertainty maybe and nervousness about like hopefully it's not just optimism. Hopefully it really is the case that especially on those two pieces that this program wouldn't be affected. It's one of those, sometimes there's the inclusion or the establishment of 2-year continuous eligibility, I think we've seen has very much slowed movement into OHP bridge. It's a great policy that has kept more people in Medicaid. And so like between the two of them has helped reduce churn. The reconciliation bills, establishment of 6 month redeterminations, and thus the likelihood that CMS will, not consider, 2-year CE in the future, right? Or the potential that they won't, really helps make this program, again, a super useful tool to mitigate the impact of churn. If more people are going to be losing Medicaid coverage, especially if we can get them to go through the process. And so if they're just losing coverage because their income is higher, then this program exists and they will be able to move to it. And so hopefully the existence of this program can hopefully help mitigate the impact on people that result from the federal policy changes by keeping them, in a program that looks very similar to Medicaid and delivered by their same health plan. And so there is, for me at times, at least that little bit of a silver lining of like, this program is designed to help keep people covered when they lose Medicaid. So policy changes at the federal level that make it harder for them to keep Medicaid, hopefully that this program can step in as it's intended to do. Well, if there's no other questions, I guess I would just note that we'll continue to be paying attention to all the federal happenings and continue to offer updates both as we learn more about these provisions, but also as other things happen. And so we'll keep bringing that back to y'all, and just don't hesitate to let us know if there's topics that you want us to talk about that were missed in this or anything else. And I guess as much as there's sort of a downside inherent in all of these, Medicaid policies that risk coverage loss, I do at least want to note that I hope that it is viewed in the good news that it's intended, that the ARPA loss and the full PAF inclusion for 2026 does, I think, offer a little bit of good news in terms of the program's financial viability in 2026 without cuts to services or requiring copays. And I do think that is at least some positive news.
All right, last call for any questions, comments, accolades, haikus. Okay. Well, thanks, Tim. So Katie has some community engagement updates for us.
Yes. Okay. So kind of moving through to add on to what Tim said regarding the federal changes. I know there's been a lot of questions about how the state is responding to various things, and the team wanted to make sure that everyone is aware that OHA does have a public website that's tracking the updates to federal policy changes, and it discusses both what the changes are and how it will impact the agency operations and programs, as well as how we think it might impact people in Oregon. This is obviously a rapidly changing and evolving situation at the federal level, so this website does the best to keep pace with that. And I'll drop the website here in the chat in a moment, as well as some of the other links that I'll be sharing with these updates. But we did want to make sure that everybody was aware that this resource exists. And is a good kind of first landing spot for questions that you might have. With that, I'm going to reiterate what I know that Tim said several times, which is that there have been a lot of federal changes to Medicaid programs. So we want to remind folks that OHP Bridge is not technically Medicaid. It is meant to look and feel to members as much of a smooth transition as possible. So it's meant to feel a lot like it, but these changes do not automatically, in most cases, apply to OHP Bridge. We know that's been said a lot. I do want to flag that when we build these slide decks, we build them both for our public presentation of them, but also for people that might go back and reference the written documents, which are available on the website. So we try to make sure that the messaging is really clear when it comes to key points like that. And just to reiterate, because OHP Bridge is delivered through the same systems and organizations, we do expect some of the policy changes could impact Bridge. So I just want to reiterate that, especially as people might access that website, that it does focus a lot on Medicaid and similar programs. And so just remember to read it through that lens. Additionally, we always want to flag that if you are a community partner or a sister, we do have a couple of different ways that you can reach us and ask questions. We know that for the OBAC specifically, questions are generally restricted to our members. So if you're a member part, or if you're a partner or a sister, there are a couple of different ways that you can reach out to us. And one of them is through our community partner outreach program, which is actually now OCHE. I'm realizing we need to update that through your regional outreach coordinators. You can also reach out via the OHP Bridge email, which is on the screen, and I have dropped it in the chat. And you can also attend our Oregon Health News monthly webinar and ask questions in real time. You can also obviously submit things via public comment to the OBAC if you'd like. For the webinars, if you're submitting questions through the avenues that are on screen here. We collect those questions over the course of the month, and then we provide answers at the webinar each month. So if you do submit a question within a week of the webinar, we aren't always able to get answers to those. And so those will be bumped to the next month, just to call that out, because sometimes we do have to bring in folks from different parts of the OHP Bridge team, such as our eligibility folks, to make sure that we've got accurate information. So we have to give our teams enough time to respond. And then we do try to get the written responses out to the original inquirer as soon as possible. If you are interested in attending the Oregon Health News webinars, they are a great source of information. They are geared, again, towards our community partners and assisters, but anyone can attend, and the link for joining those is, again, in the chat. But it is a place that we provide space for the ODHS and the Oregon Health Authority to share the latest information and resources and updates about coverage and other benefits in Oregon. So again, it's a really fantastic webinar to attend. It's offered in both English and Spanish. So the English language webinar is the second Tuesday of each month from 1 to 2 p.m. The registration link is in the chat. And the Spanish language webinar is the fourth Thursday of each month, and that's from 2 to 3 p.m. Pacific time, and that registration link is also in the chat. Okay, let me hand it back over to you, Nora.
Okay, thanks, Katie. So before we close out today's meeting, a few other little reminders. First, if you want to sign up to provide public testimony at next month's OBAC meeting, or you are a community partner with a question, please reach out to the email on the screen. Second, if you'd like to sign up for the OHP Bridge mailing list to receive updates and announcements related to OHP Bridge and the OHP Bridge Advisory Committee, that's us. You can do so at the link on the screen and in the chat. You can find out more about OBAC, including its meeting times, meeting links, and meeting materials at the OBAC website using the link shown on the screen. And then last but not least, our next meeting is on October 16th from 1 to 4 p.m. We will continue some of the discussions we had today, as well as welcoming new OBAC members. And with that, we want to issue one last thank you to Eskina, Michelle, and Nathan for your service on the OBAC. We've really appreciated your time, your participation, input, dedication that you brought to the committee over the last year, and hope to see you in the OHP Bridge space again in the future. So thank you for everyone who attended today. And Katie, anything else I've missed?
Yeah, I will just flag all the links are in the chat. I will stay on for another minute or two so folks can access those. And again, with those seats that are open, you can find more information and send that information on to folks you know who might be interested in applying through the OBAC website, which is that final link in the chat. So just want to reiterate everything Nora said in closing, and thank you to everyone for coming today, and we look forward to seeing you all in October.